It may come as a surprise to learn just how easy it is to use the new Baby Lock Imagine, but it won't be a surprise to people who know Baby Lock. After all, Baby Lock invented the first serger for home use, so naturally, Baby Lock would invent the first serger without tensions. That's right, no tensions. Whether you've owned a serger before or not, you'll find an entirely new convenience and ease in serging. And you can depend on Baby Lock for top quality performance. I'll demonstrate the basic operation of the Imagine and identify the function of each of the 4 spools of thread. Your serger uses 2 needles that carry 2 parallel straight stitch threads. Metal arms called loopers, here under the needle plate, carry the other 2 threads. They move from side to side, interlocking all 4 threads into a strong, stretchable seam, using a process very similar to knitting. The stitches form around metal prongs called stitch fingers, located on the needle plate. The prongs keep the stitches flat and prevent curling of the fabric edge. 2 cutting blades work in a scissor-like motion to trim away the seam allowance just ahead of the stitching. All of this is normally hidden from view by the presser foot, which I've removed. Its unusually long shape, combined with the length of the feed dog teeth, give the serger its firm, even feeding action. Included with the purchase of the Imagine are many helpful accessories conveniently located here in this built-in storage tray. Lift and swing the lid open to reveal the tray holding the most often used accessories. The remaining accessories are stored in this pouch found in the machine's packing materials. The Imagine adds the convenience of a snap-off presser foot. To release the foot, raise the presser foot and push this button. It's that easy. To snap it back on, place the foot under the shank and lower the presser foot lifter. Place the Imagine on a serger sewing table or a level surface where there's plenty of room to the left of the machine. Plug the power cord into the machine here, then into a wall outlet. The power switch is located above the power cord plug. When the power is turned on, the sewing light above the sewing surface is also turned on. Raise the telescopic thread guide to its highest position and rotate the shaft until each section clicks into a locked position. It's important to consider the type of thread you use for serging. You can use all threads, but a long fiber polyester or polycotton blend is the best choice. Avoid the so-called bargain threads for all your sewing. Many times skip stitches or broken threads are the direct result of inferior thread. Cone thread is especially designed for serger sewing. It feeds freely from the top. Regular thread spools can also be used if you insert one of the spool caps from the accessory packet into the top of the spool. That forms a smooth edge and lets the thread feed off evenly. When using these smaller spools of thread, replace the cone holders with these sponge discs found in the accessories. They hold the spools securely and help the thread reel off properly. Place the capped spool on the spindle. When serging with nylon, rayon, or silk threads, place a thread net over the spool and fold the net back on itself. That helps prevent the thread from slipping off the bottom of the spool during sewing. The Imagine has the exclusive instant jet air threading system for fast and easy threading, so threading sequence doesn't even matter. If a thread breaks or runs out, simply rethread and keep on serging. To thread the Imagine, I've already placed 4 spools of thread on the spindles. Raise the presser foot, open the front cover and the blade cover. Push the machine lock button firmly and rotate the hand wheel forward until the button snaps into the locked position. The lock button release lever will move to the far left. Set the looper threader selector to L for lower looper threading. Bring the thread end on the far right spindle through the telescopic thread guide directly above the spool. Snap the thread into the guide at the top of the machine, through the groove on the faceplate and into this guide. Pull an 18-inch length of thread and insert the thread end into the right thread port about 1 inch. Push the looper threading lever and the thread jets through the tubular looper, just like magic. Clip the thread about 4 inches from the lower looper eye and leave it hanging loose. Next, set the looper threader selector to U for upper looper threading. Bring the thread end from the second spindle from the right through the telescopic thread guide. Snap it into the top guide, through the groove of the faceplate and through this guide. Pull an 18-inch length of thread, place the end of the thread into the left threading port about 1 inch. Push the threading lever and the thread jets through the upper tubular looper. Place the thread under the foot and to the left. Move the lock button release lever to the right to place the Imagine in the unlocked position and close the covers. If the thread doesn't come through the tubular loopers with one push of the threading lever, make sure that there's 1 inch of thread inserted into the threading port, then push the lever again. Threading the needles is just as easy. First, turn the hand wheel to line up the green marks. Set the needle threader selector on R for the right needle. Bring the thread from the second from left spindle through the telescoping thread guide into the top guide here, through the groove in the faceplate and this guide. Bring the thread under this guide, up over the slot, and down through this final thread guide. Lower the presser foot. Hold the thread between your left thumb and middle finger, and with your right index finger, hold the thread horizontally in front and just below the needle eye. With the left index finger, push the needle threader lever down to insert the hook into the needle eye. Slip the thread into the threader hook guide in front of the needle. Release the lever and thread at the same time. Pull the loop of thread through the needle eye. Place the thread under the foot and to the left. Bring the thread on the far left spindle through the telescoping thread guide into this top guide, through the slot and this guide. Bring the thread under this guide, up and over this slot and through the final guide. Set the needle thread selector to L for left needle threading. Then thread the left needle just as I showed you with the right needle. Place the thread under the presser foot and to the left. With the needle and upper looper threads under the foot, lower the presser foot. Hold the threads and sew a few stitches to be sure a chain is forming. Now I'm ready to begin serging. With most serging applications, the presser foot can be left down. Simply place the fabric at the toe of the foot and sew. Be careful not to push or pull the fabric. The Imagine will feed it evenly without help. At the end of a seam, Just sew off the fabric edge and continue serging to create a 5 to 6 inch thread chain. Then cut the chain with the thread cutter on the left side cover. When sewing heavier or thicker fabrics, or if precise positioning is required, simply lift the presser foot to position the fabric before sewing. Maneuvering the fabric on a serger is a bit different than on a conventional machine because the stitches are formed around stitch fingers. There may be times when you need to clear the stitch fingers. To do that, raise the presser foot. Turn the hand wheel to raise the needle to the highest position. Then pull the threads gently from behind the foot. The stitches are now released from the fingers. The exclusive automatic thread delivery system on the Imagine has completely changed the way sergers work. Tensions are a thing of the past. Simply decide which stitch you want to use, then turn the stitch selector dial to A, B, C, or D. To select a setting, open the front cover and turn the selector so the letter aligns with this mark. There's a chart in the back of the instruction manual that indicates the appropriate setting for each stitch type. It's easy to change the length and width of a stitch on the Imagine. The stitch length is located here. The dial shows 2 stitch length ranges, each numbered from 1 for the shortest stitch to 4 for the longest stitch. One range is for standard serging and one is for rolled edging or narrow seaming. Simply turn the dial, aligning the desired setting with this indicator on the machine. This is the stitch width dial. It also displays 2 sets of numbers. The large numbers at each end of the dial, 5.5 and 7.5 millimeters, indicate the stitch width when the left-hand needle is used. The smaller number, 5 and 3, indicate the width when the right-hand needle is used. The M setting is for the rolled edge. Simply turn the dial, aligning the desired setting with the indicator on the machine. Adjusting the stitch width moves the upper cutting blade. It also moves the stitch fingers farther apart or closer together for complete fabric support with any stitch width. The Imagine is equipped with differential feed. For normal sewing, the differential feed lever is set at N. Move the lever to point 6 to hold the fabric taut as you sew, keeping lightweight fabrics from puckering. Set the lever above N to ease or compact the fabric, preventing stretched or wavy seams, especially in knits. There may be times when you want to serge without trimming the fabric edge, stitching over a fold, for instance. To disengage the upper cutting blade, turn the lock switch clockwise to the lock position. The upper cutting blade no longer moves up and down, but remains in its lowered position. The 4-thread stitch is a strong, durable stitch that can be used for seaming on all knits and tightly woven fabrics. The 4-thread stitch sews the seam, trims the seam allowance, and overcasts the edge all at the same time. You'll really appreciate the time you'll save using the Imagine for seaming. For 4-thread seaming, set the stitch selector to A. The stitch length range can be set between 6 and 7.5. For most seaming, set the stitch length between 2.5 and 3.5. Both needles are used. Place 2 layers of fabric right sides together. When you guide the fabric through the machine, match the fabric edge to the seam guide markings on the front door. The red marking indicates the width when the left needle is in use, and the yellow marking indicates the width when only the right needle is used. You'll be trimming away about 1/4 inch of excess seam allowance. At the end, just sew off the edge and cut the thread chain. Your completed seam will press to one side inside the garment. That's a strong, durable seam. It's important not to serge over pins. Cutting through those pins would definitely dull your blades. If you need to pin, just remove each pin as it approaches the blades. Another option is to put your pins in from the opposite direction, with the heads toward the body of the fabric and the points back about ½ inch from the cut edge. They can then feed easily under the presser foot without touching the blades. The 4-thread stitch is an excellent choice for gathering using the differential feed feature. The stitch selector is set at A. Set the differential feed lever to 2 and the stitch length to the longest setting of 4. Place a single layer of fabric at the toe of the foot and serge. What an efficient way to create endless rows of pretty ruffles. If you want fuller gathers, smooth out the thread chain and identify the 2 shorter thread strands. These are the needle threads. Now just pull on those 2 strands to adjust or more fully gather the fabric. What a lovely finish! You have the option of using either the left or the right needle to serge a 3-thread stitch. This stitch has even greater stretch and less bulk for seaming knits, and it has some interesting decorative applications. For a wide 3-thread stitch, the left needle is used. The stitch selector is set at A, and the stitch width is set at 7.5. To remove a needle, just snip the thread above the eye of the needle. Hold the needle with the needle inserter tool and loosen the small needle holder screw. Lift the needle out of the way and tighten the screw so it doesn't vibrate loose when serging. I'll use this wide 3-thread stitch for a rib trim neckline. Fold a strip of rib trim in half, wrong sides together, and place it against the right side of the neckline, matching all 3 cut edges. Place all 3 layers at the toe of the foot and take a few stitches to secure the layers. Stretch the rib trim as you serge the seam, guiding the body of the neckline towards the blades. That looks just like ready-made. Use this stitch to make your next swimsuit. The narrow 3-thread stitch is nice to use for seaming lightweight fabrics such as nylon tricot. It makes a beautiful, delicate seam in lingerie. For the narrow 3-thread stitch, use just the right needle. The stitch selector is set at B, the width at 3, and the length between 2.5 and 3.5. To replace the right needle, turn the hand wheel toward you, lining up the green marks to raise the needle bar to the highest position. Loosen the right needle screw and use the needle insertion tool to insert the needle with the flat side to the back. Raise the needle as far as it will go, checking the position in the needle height viewing area. Tighten the screw, then thread the needle as usual. If you accidentally drop the needle into the machine, just pull out the needle drop drawer at the bottom of the Imagine. The needle will be in the drawer. Place 2 layers of fabric together and serge for a perfect narrow seam. One of the most time-saving features of the Imagine is the narrow edge finish. You can quickly add this professional finish to the edge of napkins, ruffles, and garment hems. Use the right needle and a shorter stitch length for maximum thread coverage. When narrow hemming on medium to heavyweight fabrics, set the stitch selector to C. The stitch width is set between 3 or 4. I'll set the stitch length to 1 or 1.5 in the rolled hem range. Now simply serge the fabric edge, trimming as you sew, for a fabulous finish. The 3-thread rolled edge finish produces an even narrower edge finish and is perfect when sewing on lightweight fabrics. The trimmed fabric edge rolls around the stitch finger. The upper looper thread wraps the fabric edge while the lower looper thread is nearly invisible on the back side of the stitch formation. Using the right needle, I'll set the stitch length to 1 or 1.5 in the rolled hem range. The width is set at 3.5 or the M setting, and the stitch selector is set to D. The rolled edge finish can be applied to a vast array of sewing situations. To add some extra dimension, use a decorative thread in the upper looper. Use a standard thread in the needle and the lower looper in a color to match the decorative thread. To serge up a set of colorful napkins, just sew right off the corners. Add a drop of liquid seam sealant and let it dry before you trim away the excess thread chain. Use this stitch to sew seams in sheer fabrics, replacing the time-consuming French seaming. It's that easy to sew a nearly invisible seam. A section of the rolled edge thread chain, stitched without any fabric under it, makes instant belt loops or button loops. You can create a frilly lettuce edge by stitching the rolled edge on knit fabric. The differential feed is set at the lowest 0.6 setting to stretch the fabric as you serge. Let the blades trim at least a 1/4 inch of the fabric as you sew. For additional lettucing, you may want to gently stretch the fabric as you sew. The edge remains stretched when the body of the fabric relaxes, creating the rippled finish. Another variation of the 3-thread seaming is the flat lock seam. This particular seam is best suited for fabrics which don't tend to ravel, such as a nylon tricot, a polar or sweatshirt fleece, or interlock knit. The serged edges of a flat lock seam pull open and flatten within the stitch for a non-bulky join. Use the right needle, set the stitch selector to D, the stitch length between 2 or 3, and the stitch width between 3 or 5. For 3-thread flat locking, the threading path for the right needle is somewhat different. Place the cone of thread on the second from left spindle and bring the thread through the telescoping thread guide above the spindle as usual. Now bring the thread through the upper looper thread channel. Snap the thread into this thread guide, down the slot in the faceplate, and through this guide. Bring the thread over here and under this thread guide, then up over the slot and through this final thread guide. Thread the needle as usual. Close the front cover. Test sew to be sure a thread chain is forming. Place the 2 layers of fabric right sides together and serge, trimming the seam edge as you sew. When the seam is complete, pull crosswise to flatten the stitches. The 2-thread serging function on the Imagine can be used for a variety of applications. It's an excellent choice for overcasting fabric edges. It's much less bulky than the 3 or 4-thread stitch. It can also be used to create a flat lock seam, and it creates some interesting effects when used with decorative thread. The two-thread flat lock uses the left or right needle and the lower looper only. To convert to two-thread serging, open the front cover and the blade cover. Cut the upper looper thread just above the threading port. Raise the presser foot and pull out the clipped thread from under the foot. Remove the upper looper thread from the machine. Turn the hand wheel to bring the upper looper to its lowest position. Rotate the subsidiary looper to the left to slip the end into the upper looper eye. It may be easier to rethread before engaging the subsidiary looper. For a wide two-thread stitch, use the left needle. Set the stitch selector to A, the stitch width to 7.5, and the length between 2 and 2.5. For two-thread serging with the left needle, place the thread cone on the far left spindle. Bring the thread end through the telescoping thread guide directly above the spool pin. Bring the thread through the top guide, third from the left, down the faceplate and through this guide. Place the machine in the locked position. Set the looper threader selector to U. Pull an 18-inch length of thread and place the thread end into the left threading port. Press the threading lever and the thread end will come out here at the upper looper eye. Unlock the machine to expose the thread. Using your tweezers, pull the thread out of the tubular looper here. Take the thread end and bring it up over to this thread guide, under this thread guide, and over this slot. Bring it through this final needle guide. Align the green marks on the hand wheel. Place the needle threader selector to L and lower the presser foot to thread the needle. Close the blade cover and front cover. Test sew to be sure a thread chain is forming. One of the most basic ways to use a serger is to finish fabric edges on hems, facings, and seams. It's easiest to overcast those edges while the pieces are flat before any seams are sewn. For finishing, guide the fabric so the blades just skim the fabric edge, trimming away any ravelly threads before the stitches are sewn. Now the fabric sections are ready to be sewn on the sewing machine. That's a neat finish. The two-thread stitch can also be used to create flat lock seams. It is often used as a decorative stitch since one side of the stitch looks like loops of thread and the other side looks like sideways straight stitches or ladders. Either can be the outside of the seam, it's just a matter of your preference. Before sewing, decide which stitch pattern you want to have on the outside of the garment. For loops to be on the outside, place your layers of fabric wrong sides together, just the opposite of normal sewing. Sew the seam. Then pull crosswise on the stitches to pull flat. If you want to see ladders on the outside, place the fabric layers right sides together as usual. Sew the seam. Then pull flat when it is complete. You can create the appearance of flat locking in places where the garment doesn't even have a seam. Place the cutting blade in the lock position. Fold the fabric and sew over the fold. Guide the fabric just to the inside of the locked blade so the stitches will hang slightly over the folded edge. Then pull crosswise to flatten the stitches. Remember to flat lock with loops showing, fold the fabric right side out, and to flat lock with ladders showing, fold the fabric wrong side out. A narrow two-thread flatlock stitch can be used to produce a nearly invisible blind hem. For a narrow two-thread flatlock, use the right needle. Set the stitch selector to B. Set the stitch length to the longest setting of 4 and the stitch width to 5. For threading, place the needle thread cone on the second from left spindle and bring the thread through the telescoping thread guide directly above the spool pin. Bring the thread through the top guide, third from left, down the faceplate, and through this guide. Place the machine in the locked position. Set the looper threader selector to U. Pull an 18-inch length of thread and place the thread end into the left threading port. Press the threading lever and the thread will come out through the upper looper eye. Unlock the machine to expose the thread. Using your tweezers, pull the thread out of the tubular looper here. Take the thread end and bring it up and over this thread guide, under this guide, and over this slot and through the final thread guide. Engage the subsidiary looper. Place the needle selector lever to R. Align the green marks on the hand wheel and lower the presser foot. Now thread the needle as usual. Close the covers, then test sew to be sure a chain is forming. To serge a hem, fold up the hemline and press it in place. Then fold the hem allowance back against the right side of the fabric, creating a soft fold in the garment with about a 1/4 inch of hem allowance extending beyond the fold. Place the fold under the presser foot and stitch, allowing the needle to catch only a thread or two along the soft fold. The blades will trim the edge of the hem allowance and the stitches will encase the raw edge. When the hem is complete, simply fold the hem down to its normal position and press flat. I'll show you how easy it is to return to standard 3 or 4 thread serging. Open the front cover and the blade cover. Gently push back on the subsidiary looper and rotate it to the right until it snaps back into place and out of the way. Clip the thread above the left threading port and remove the clipped thread from the needle, then from under the foot. Simply rethread the upper looper and needles for 3 or 4 thread serging. Since a serger operates differently than a conventional sewing machine, some of the sewing techniques are different as well. For instance, a serger doesn't have a reverse function to lock the ends of seams. In most cases, a serged seam is secured by an intersecting seam. If that isn't the case, there are several methods for securing the ends, and I'll show you just how easy it is to do that. First of all, to lock the beginning of a seam, sew 3 to 4 stitches into the fabric. Turn the hand wheel forward to lower the needles into the fabric and raise the presser foot. Run your fingers along the thread chain to smooth out the loops. Bring the thread chain forward and under the presser foot. Lower the foot, and as you continue sewing, the new stitches will form over the original chain. After serging about 1 inch, pull the chain to the right and the blades will trim away the excess. To lock the end of a seam, sew just until the needles are at the end of the fabric. Turn the hand wheel to bring the needles up and raise the presser foot. Pull some slack in the needle thread and gently pull the fabric to the back to clear the stitch fingers. Flip the fabric over and reposition it under the foot. Lock the cutting blade so you don't cut the original stitches. Lower the foot and sew about 1 inch, then sew off the edge and cut the thread chain. There are several other options for securing the ends of seams. Leave a 3-inch thread chain, then separate the threads and tie a knot. Apply a dot of seam sealant on the thread chain at the fabric edge. When it has dried, cut off the excess thread chain. Leave a 4 to 5 inch thread chain and use a large-eyed tapestry needle to weave the chain back into the stitching. Turning corners requires a bit of special handling. To turn an outside corner, serge just to the edge of the corner. Raise the needles to the highest position and lift the presser foot. Pull some slack on the needle thread, then gently pull on the fabric behind the foot. This clears the last few loops of the stitch from around the stitch fingers so the fabric can move freely. Now you can turn the fabric. Lower the foot and continue sewing in the new direction. To turn an inside corner, stitch until the blades, not the needles, reach the inside of the corner. Lower the needles to secure the fabric, then lift the presser foot. Maneuver the fabric so that a pleat forms to the left of the needles and the right hand edge becomes straight. Lower the foot and complete the stitching. When the corner is overcast, the pleat disappears as the fabric returns to its original shape. To overcast inside or outside curves, guide the fabric edge toward the blades rather than the needles. Remember that cutting takes place before the fabric reaches the needle. The tape slot in the standard presser foot will guide a narrow tape or ribbon right under the stitching. Insert the tape through the slot and under the back of the presser foot like this. Place your fabric under the foot and stitch the tape into the seam. Use it to stabilize stretchy fabrics in areas like the shoulder seam of a t-shirt. Making spaghetti straps and narrow bias cording for belt loops is quick and easy with the narrow rolled edge setting. Start by running a thread chain a little longer than the strap you plan to make. Bring the chain to the front. Fold the fabric around the chain, making sure it stays securely in the fold. Serge the edges, making sure the chain doesn't get caught in the stitching. The blades trim away the excess seam allowance. When the stitching is complete, pull on the thread chain to turn the strap right side out. It couldn't be simpler. Beautiful stitches can be created by serging with specialty threads, cords, and ribbons. These heavier or shinier threads can be used to enhance appearance, add strength or elasticity, or create special effects depending on the thread you choose. Some specialty threads work well through the needle in loopers, while others are too heavy to be threaded through the eye of the needle. The loopers have larger eyes that will accommodate the heavier threads. Specialty threads used in the needle can be threaded in the usual way. I'll show you a few easy methods for threading the loopers with decorative threads. One of the easiest is tying on. Use this technique for lightweight threads such as rayon and nylon monofilament thread. Clip the existing thread at the cone and replace the cone with a new thread spool. Tie the two thread ends together. Raise the presser foot and pull the old thread from under the foot until the new thread comes through the machine. When changing a needle thread, pull the thread through until it reaches the needle eye. Clip off the knot and rethread the needle. Some medium weight threads, such as top stitching thread or stretched nylon thread, may be too bulky to form a knot that would fit through the threading port. In that case, use the looper threading tool. Thread the machine above the threading port as usual. Place the machine in the locked position and set the looper selector to U or L according to which looper is to be threaded. Place the straight end of the looper threading tool into the threading port, pushing it through until the end comes out of the looper eye. Place the loose end of the specialty thread into the looper threading tool. Pull the straight end of the tool through the looper eye and the specialty thread will follow. When using heavy threads such as pearl cotton or a ribbon thread, bypass the threading port by making a thread cradle from regular thread. Remove all threads from the thread path. Thread the specialty thread in the upper thread guides. Place the machine in the locked position and set the looper threading switch to U or L according to which looper is to be threaded. Cut a 24-inch length of regular thread and fold it in half to make the thread cradle. Insert the loose ends into the threading port about 1 inch. Holding onto the cradle loop with your left hand, press the threading lever until the thread comes out the looper eye. Release the machine lock button. While holding the loose ends of the thread cradle with one hand, use the tweezers to pull the cradle loop out of the tube extending from the threading mechanism. Place 2 inches of your decorative thread into the cradle loop. Pull on the regular thread from the looper eye until the specialty thread comes through the looper eye. When serging with decorative threads, you may need to use a longer stitch length. As easy as the Imagine is to use, it's just as easy to maintain. Because of the cutting action, lint builds up rather quickly in and around the blades and loopers. Remove it frequently with the lint brush found with your accessories. It's very important to change needles often. A bent or damaged needle can cause inconsistent or even broken stitches. The Baby Lock Imagine uses standard sewing machine needles. The technology involved in creating the Baby Lock Imagine is like no other. The benefit of the technology makes serging more professional, more creative, and way more fun for you. No tensions on the Imagine means stress-free serging in your sewing room. Check with your Baby Lock retailer for additional serging resources and any available accessories for use with your Imagine. If you have any comments or questions, you can contact us at our website, www.babylock.com, or write to us, Baby Lock USA, Education Department, Post Office Box 730, Fenton, Missouri 63026.